The best place to watch, listen, and follow MMA is up here in the Nosebleeds. Welcome to FTN from the Nosebleeds MMA Podcast. Episode 9 is in your ear, whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and SoundCloud. Big thank you to Robert Jemias, Don't Be a Richard Music, and So Wear Clothing. Happy to have you with us for another half hour or so of Smackdown Smack Talk. Brick, what is going on today in the show?
All right, today in episode 9, I cannot believe we're actually there.
That's crazy.
Nine shows over about 10 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
For today's show, episode 9, in the rundown, we have 5 rounds per usual. Round 1, we're going to be talking about the real winners of UFC 243 that happened over this weekend in Australia. Round 2, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes, Whitaker versus Adesanya. Round 3 is That's Debatable. Is Israel Adesanya among the top 2 greatest middleweights of all time? Round 4, Are You Here For It? Jon Jones versus Israel Adesanya. We have a lot of Izzy in the show today. And round 5, UFC Tampa with Cub Swanson versus Kron Gracie and Michelle Watterson versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. That's going to be an exciting event this weekend. For the first bit of our show, as we like to do top 5 lists, last week we did wrestlers, I believe. Before that, we did rivalries, I think. Right now, we're going to talk about top 5 strikers. Blake, if you'd like to kick it off, I'll hand you the ball now.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about the top 5 strikers because Israel Adesanya is absolutely one of the top 5 strikers in the UFC now. So number 5, I'm going to go with Jon Jones, and the reason I go with Jon Jones is because he's more of a wrestler. His base is his wrestling, but his ability to keep fighters at bay and his ability to hold fighters away and use his reach as an advantage is such a good skill that Jon Jones has, and it's incredible. Number 4, I'm going to go with Stipe Miocic. He is pretty much purely a striker, and at the heavyweight division, he has knockout power unlike anybody else. The way he was able to knock out Daniel Cormier, the way he was able to keep it from going to the ground, and when he was on the ground, he was able to get back up pretty easily. Stipe Miocic is such an incredible striker. Number 3, I'm going to go with Max Holloway. Pure striker, great takedown defense, but Max has an ability at the featherweight division to pretty much dominate anybody strictly through his one style of fighting, which is striking. He doesn't have a whole lot of ground game. He doesn't really like to go to the ground or wrestle or anything like that, but he's able to stand up, go up against any fighter, and really just do anything he wants to them at the featherweight division, and it's something that's really, really incredible, and his reign has been for so long. Number 2, this might shock some people. I'm going to go with Israel Adesanya. I'm not going to put him at number 1. You'll see why. Israel Adesanya's performance showed everything that I need to see to show that he is legit. He has better cardio. He has everything in his arsenal in terms of head movement, quickness. Robert Whitaker couldn't buy a shot on him. And Izzy was I don't know if those heavy shots that Robert Whitaker had at the end of the first round and obviously the knockout, I don't think that it necessarily was his pure brute strength, but his accuracy. His accuracy is so much, it almost reminds me of a Conor McGregor back in 2015, 2016, those days. It is something that is one of a kind. His accuracy and his precision is just awesome. And Israel Adesanya, I'd say probably the sharpest striker of the UFC. Number 1, I'm going to go with Amanda Nunes. And the reason I go with Amanda Nunes is she has knocked out everybody who is great. Holly Holm, Chris Cyborg, Ronda Rousey. She's beaten everybody, and it's not through her ground and pound. It's not through her ability to wrestle or anything like that. It's not her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's her striking. She comes in there, and she absolutely mauls everybody. And it's something like we've never seen before. Take the greatest men's fighter of all time. Let's give it Jon Jones. And let's say that somehow magically all of the greatest men's fighters of all time were all in the light heavyweight division, and Jon Jones were to knock out every single one of them. That's what Amanda Nunes is doing, and that's what makes Amanda Nunes so great. So that is my top 5 strikers. I want to hear yours.
All right. I like that list. Pretty diverse.
Thanks.
Now, before I get into my real list, please don't get angry with me because I was doing this last night and I got so excited. And there were 6 fighters that I was like, I can't do a top 5. I have to do a top 6. And then I realized half of them aren't even active anymore. Oh my gosh, bonehead mistake. So here's my top 6 that I'm so frustrated about. Demetrius Johnson at number 6. Technically not a UFC fighter anymore. Coming in at number 5, TJ Dillashaw, not technically active in the UFC. Number 4, Conor McGregor. Who knows when he's going to come back? Number 3, Israel Adesanya. Very legit. Number 2, John Jones. And number 1, Anderson Silva. I don't know if we could say Anderson Silva is... I mean, he's active technically, but for how much longer? Who knows? So now let me give you my real list. And this is going to shock a few because a lot of names are left out. Number 5, Edson Barboza. Edson Barboza has probably one of the most fantastic knockouts in UFC history with his spinning wheel kick. That knockout will forever go down, I think, as the greatest single strike knockout in UFC history. His range is undeniable. His range, in my opinion, is better than anyone else, and his kicks are just vicious. We haven't really seen a fighter like Edson Barboza use just one element of striking to that much of a benefit. He has like 4 or 5 TKOs just from kicking. That's pretty impressive. Number 4, Justin Gaethje. For a man who has as little experience in the UFC and as many knockouts as he has in his career, I think he has 2 losses, and that's it. And then I think he has only 1 or 2 other fights that went to the decision. So we're talking a 90%, close to an 85% knockout rate. That in and of itself, that is a statistic that speaks for itself. Justin Gaethje has not only knockout power, but incredible accuracy. Coming in at number 3 for me, I have to stay with Conor McGregor. Although he hasn't been active, he's technically still active in the UFC. We see through Twitter, we see through every sort of social media and YouTube video possible that Conor McGregor is still hungry and he wants to come back. When? We're not quite sure. Hopefully there is a Justin Gaethje-Conor McGregor fight in the works, but Conor McGregor in his prime was absolutely unstoppable. He defeated amazing fighters that I would have put in this list just a few years ago. Dustin Poirier, Max Holloway, who was in your list. He defeated Eddie Alvarez in one of the most clinical striking performance we have seen. Just 4 straight knocks to the head.
Insane.
Other than that, he defeated Chad Mendes, who normally would have destroyed Conor with his wrestling, but Conor found a way to defend his takedowns and to beat him with striking. So Conor McGregor in his prime is definitely in that top 5. Number 2, Israel Adesanya. With a pure kickboxing background and with the resume that Israel Adesanya has before coming into the UFC, there's no shot that he does not make the top 3 strikers of my list today. So he's incredibly talented, incredibly accurate. I just think he has a bit more to do in the UFC to be solidified as a big talking point. Number 1, John Jones. I know, I'm sorry. You never get over it. John Jones, as you were correct, has a wrestling background, has a very good grappling background. But if you go back and watch a majority of his fights, not just times that he finished fighters, not just the ends of fights, but the whole thread, right? The entire process of him picking fighters apart. OSP, Daniel Cormier twice, Shogun Rua, Lyoto Machida, Alexander Gustafsson twice. If you go back and watch those fights, the amount of spinning elbows, straight jabs, hooks that are just accurate and deep leaves me no choice but to put John Jones as the number 1, seeing as he has dominated a division for over a decade now.
Okay. I love that list, Brick. And as much as we don't always see eye to eye, it's always really good stuff. Let's jump into round number 1. The real winners of UFC 243, not necessarily the main card, but other people on the card that we were impressed by. Brick, who do you have?
Well, right off the bat, I have Sergey Spivak, and we talked about this a little bit. His fight was just super impressive. He kind of came in as an underdog against Tai Tuivasa, and he absolutely just demolished him in all facets of the game, in takedowns, in wrestling, in striking, in just about everything that you could ask for in a heavyweight fighter. Now, I don't necessarily think he's going to have a title shot in the next year or so, but he was very impressive, and I think he will get that shot after all is said and done between Stipe, Ngannou, John Jones, whoever else there is.
Well, what's so exciting about this was Tai Tuivasa was given everything for this event. He was just coming off of an electrifying win a few months ago, and they gave him somebody who they thought, oh yeah, we'll give him another win. We'll give him something that he can beat. He was in his hometown, and pretty much everything was against Sergey. Didn't matter. Sergey dragged him into the deep waters, and it was nonstop over significant strikes, total strikes, 6 takedowns. Sergey Spivak did everything he wanted to Tai Tuivasa, and he made it look easy. After the fight, he was speaking to John Anik, and he said that he was impressed that he was impressed by Tai Tuivasa, and he said that was a tough fight. That's not what I saw. I saw Sergey Spivak give everything to Tai Tuivasa, and Tai Tuivasa really didn't have an answer outside of maybe his power striking. It was an Australian guy versus a dude from Chisinau who I have no idea who he was. I have no idea where that is. But it was all I can say is like, remember that name, because he is going to be a big name in the heavyweight division. Maybe one of the best grapplers next to Daniel Cormier in the heavyweight division. Yeah. I would have to say he took him on his back. He must have had, or he did have 6 takedowns, which in MMA you don't see that often. Because they weren't all just double legs and single legs. They were judo throws. They were sweeps. They were things that we don't really see in MMA, and I was blown away by it.
Well, at least in the heavyweight division.
Yes.
In the lighter divisions, we see a lot more technical takedowns. But in the heavyweight division, that was fresh. You're right. That was nice to see. A big guy who, going up against a Tai Tuivasa who wants to just throw haymakers. He's kind of like the Mark Hunt of today.
Greg Hardy.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, Sergey Spivak went in there and just absolutely technically took the match to Tai Tuivasa. One more name that I want to say, although he was in the early prelims of this fight, he is a name that I am excited for. Especially in a division that's kind of getting a little boring. Khalid Taha, German bantamweight, defeats Bruno Silva from an arm triangle. That fight was spectacular. And Khalid Taha is a unit. He is a scary, scary body type, especially in the bantamweight division. I think he is making a surge towards bantamweight relevancy at this point. I think he will hopefully have a title shot in the future because he's an exciting, exciting fighter.
I also want to give a quick shout out, and this was a co-main event, but Dan Hooker looked so good against Ali Quinta. Oh, yeah. He looked so, he's going to get a big name. His next fight is going to be a big name, and he made a veteran in Ali Quinta who has notable, even his loss. People look at Ali Quinta's loss to Khabib as almost a win because he lasted and that he actually gave Khabib a problem, And Dan Hooker made him look like, Dan Hooker really gave him everything that he had, and it was incredible. So that's all I've got.
All right, let's jump into round 2 of this episode today. We are going to be discussing at this point Whittaker versus Adesanya, which was said to be the biggest fight in Oceania history. I'd have to agree. If you saw that crowd, if you saw the hype, if you saw everything about that fight, it would be very hard to disagree that this was not a landmark in UFC history.
I was blown away at Israel Adesanya's ability to be so precise. And like we said earlier in the top 5 strikers, it reminded me of Conor McGregor in his prime. It reminded me of, you're not necessarily the strongest guy. You're not necessarily the biggest guy who cuts down 50, 60 pounds in order to just beat up on smaller guys. This is strictly, Israel Adesanya is 183 pounds. If he were to cut weight, he could fight at welterweight. But it's not that. It's not his power that is the defining factor of his striking. It's his precision. It's his ability to find the pockets, his ability to use his head movement. Robert Whittaker was throwing everything at him. Robert Whittaker came out of the gates swinging haymakers left and right. Israel Adesanya was just dodging, no problem. Kickboxing. It goes to show why he is so good at his base, which is kickboxing. And I was truly amazed at just how prepared he was for Robert Whittaker. And I'm not going to lie, I think Robert Whittaker had a little bit of ring rust. I think he didn't look 100% like a world champion in that fight. He was trying to close the distance the entire time. I don't think there was a fighter on the entire main card with a reach advantage that didn't win. Everybody with a reach advantage won all of their fights. And Israel Adesanya made no difference in that. And I was talking about that with my friends when we were watching the fights.
This is very interesting what I'm about to say. And I posted this actually as a comment on I think it was on UFC's page after the win. I'd like to quote the great Conor McGregor when he said, "Precision beats power and timing beats speed." I think that is so true for 3 fighters. 1 being Conor McGregor, obviously. 2, Israel Adesanya, obviously. And number 3, the king of precision, of accuracy, of speed, Anderson Silva. Israel Adesanya, in my opinion, is such a perfect mixture of Conor McGregor and Anderson Silva. Although he's not quite at the greatest of all time talking point that Anderson Silva forever will be, he has the hype of Conor McGregor. He has the energy of Conor McGregor. He captures a crowd like Conor McGregor does. He is eloquent in his trash talk like Conor McGregor is. But he has the head movement. He has just the serpent-like slithering around the cage and then just hitting you with a straight right or a kick that just ends it for you like Anderson Silva did. To your point that you talked about Israel Adesanya being so similar to Cody Garbrandt, I agree. And I don't think that is still impossible. If you remember, Cody Garbrandt was the champion, not the interim champion. So there's still some time for possibly a smaller, stronger Paulo Costa to come along and do what happened to Cody Garbrandt. However, here's the only reason that I would disagree with that. He got clipped by a fighter who had less reach, who was smaller and had a little bit more power. That's exactly what Izzy went up against this weekend and what he's going to go up against Paulo Costa. His head movement's just too good. He's too quick. He's just too slippery to get caught in that sense.
But here's my question, and I just want to end the round with this. I'm going to dive a little bit I'm going to pull out of my Uncle Chael pocket just how good is Conor McGregor, just how good is Kelvin Gastelum, just how good is he. He was able to take shots. They went to a war, and Robert Whittaker couldn't take Izzy's 2 biggest shots of the fight.
And some of that could be ring rust. Some of that could be just
totally
Robert Whittaker has less of a chin than Kelvin Gastelum. I don't know.
But just how good is Kelvin Gastelum? I think Kelvin Gastelum doesn't deserve a rematch by any means, but he is definitely somebody that we should not just forget about due to his loss against Israel Adesanya. He is still up there as one of the top middleweights in the world. And anyways, that's all I had.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Round 3, let's go. Last week, we did the first edition of That's Debatable when we talked about the 3 title fights of UFC 245 that will take place in Vegas. This week, we're going to be debating, is Israel Adesanya among the top 2 greatest middleweights of all time? And so far, I would have to say, yeah, top 2. And here's why. The top middleweight of all time will go down in history, and his name is Anderson Silva. I don't think there's any debating that Anderson in his prime, that there's any fighter who looked better, more technical, just more clean than Anderson Silva did. And even when Anderson Silva had to get down in the dirt with the dogs like Chael Sonnen, he still came out with a win. He would adapt his fighting style to someone like Chael and still win. Israel Adesanya, in my opinion, makes that top list now because of what he did against Robert Whittaker. And then having defeated Anderson Silva, the number 1 greatest middleweight of all time, just a few months ago. Also having defeated Kelvin Gastelum, former interim champ, I think Israel Adesanya has solidified himself for now as one of the top 2 of all time. The reason I say top 2 is because, and the reason why I say for now, is because what if Israel Adesanya goes on to defeat a returning GSP, or he goes on to defeat a Khabib Nurmagomedov who finally makes the jump up to middleweight? If we see that happen, who knows where this conversation leads us? But Adesanya for now has solidified himself very much so in that conversation.
It's totally in the conversation as one of the greatest. I wouldn't put him at top 2 just yet. 1, I think Anderson Silva is the greatest striker of all time, the most clear, the most concise, the cleanest, like you were saying. Anderson Silva is the greatest middleweight of all time. But I'm going to go a little bit further and say let's just pump the brakes a little bit on Israel Adesanya. Recency bias is totally a thing. Chris Weidman absolutely had a great reign at 185, one of the greatest 185ers of all time, beat Anderson Silva. Let's not forget about that. And I think all around, he's just kind of a better fighter. He's a good grappler. He's a good striker. He can go to the decision, and he wins at decision. Anderson Silva is just the greatest striker of all time. GSP fought at 185, and he is a purebred wrestler, and I think that he would be able to out-grapple Israel Adesanya. We've never really seen a whole lot of Israel Adesanya on the ground. I mean, when we saw him against Kelvin, who was very undersized, and Izzy was able to use his length to out-jiu-jitsu him, throw him in a triangle, but Kelvin got out. I think GSP doesn't let that happen if they were to fight, and if we're having this conversation of in their primes who is the better fighter, I think it's still GSP who has fought at 185, so he does, count in this category. Even a Chael Sonnen, who is never won a title, never been the champion of the middleweight division, but went up when the middleweight division was absolutely stacked, and he was always in the conversation. He was always fighting the best of the best, and always coming up a little bit short. But Chael by no means is any scrub, and Chael is absolutely the guy who would go in against Israel Adesanya, throw a 1-2 in order to get a double leg and take down Israel Adesanya. And from that point, that's uncharted territory. We don't see or we don't know what happens there. So with the one-dimensional style of Israel Adesanya, a striker versus a striker, pretty much against anybody in the world, I think he probably wins. But not against a prime Silva, and I don't think he beats an elite wrestler or someone like Chris Weidman who can beat anybody in almost any style who's had such a great reign.
The reason I disagree is when you're saying beats. I don't think he beats. I don't necessarily think so either. But the reason why I'm putting Adesanya among the top two is for his potential, for how impressive he has been since his UFC debut. Now, Israel Adesanya, like I just said in the last round, is a lot like Conor McGregor. When we put Conor McGregor up against bigger fighters like Nate Diaz, stronger fighters like Chad Mendes, wrestlers, everyone was like, he's going to get starched. He's going to get Khabib'd. He's going to get thrown on the ground. He's going to get ground and pounded. And for the most part, that did happen.
Round 2, rear naked choke.
I get it. I know.
round 4, rear naked choke.
I know that. But I'm saying the striking of Conor McGregor plus a little bit extra working out on his takedown defense saw him a rematch victory over Nate Diaz. Gave him a victory in the 5th round in the last dying moments of the fight against a Chad Mendes, and has given him victories over superior, stronger fighters in upper weight classes. So I think Israel Adesanya, if he just sticks to his guns and kickboxing and his accuracy, but works on putting on maybe a little bit of muscle, a little bit of strength, so that he can defend takedowns against a Chris Weidman, a GSP, then he very much could find himself in that top 2.
So you're saying he could be. He isn't just yet.
I definitely say we can't say that he isn't just because the guy's undefeated. You can't say he's not one of the top 2 because, well, what if he faced this guy? What if he faced this guy? What if this happened? Well, as far as what ifs, Israel Adesanya is 18-0. That's what he thinks about what ifs. I think it's hard to say that he's not in that conversation or he's not among the top 2 just because we have found 0 people on the planet who can defeat Israel Adesanya up to this point.
But if you go up against someone when the 185 division was stacked, whereas right now it's a little bit more shallow than it used to be, I think there's good names, but I don't think any of those names live up to the hype of a Weidman, a Silva, a Chael, a GSP, a Bisping, Luke Rockhold. It's up in the air as to what Israel Adesanya would have been able to do to those guys. Round number 4, let's jump into UFC Tampa. Michelle Waterson versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk. Brick, this is going to be a really exciting fight. Who do you have winning this one?
As you said, very exciting fight. I think it's going to be a close fight. We have 2 fighters, in my opinion, who are on completely opposite spectrums. You have Michelle Waterson, who's we could still call her a rising star in the UFC, having fought in The Ultimate Fighter, and that's kind of where she made her name and where she started in the UFC. I could still consider her a rising star in the division, considering she's never had a title shot, considering this is the closest that she's had to a big name fighter in the UFC. She's had a couple of losses, sure, but she is on a different wavelength. She's on a different calendar than Joanna is. Joanna is she's on the downslope from victory. She's on the downslope from legendary status. And for a fighter to be on that downslope and regain traction to get back up to the title is a little bit more difficult to do. And so I think I take Michelle Waterson in this fight due to striking, overall strength. Michelle Waterson she's no twig. She's got some muscle, and I think she has superior takedowns. I think she has, at this moment, superior striking. Although Joanna Jędrzejczyk is coming off that legendary status, I give the edge to Waterson.
Joanna Jędrzejczyk also has not been super active at strawweight. She hasn't been fighting. She's only fought, I believe, once at strawweight in the last year and a half or something like that. Michelle Waterson, on the other hand, has not been the most active fighter, but she's been more active than Joanna Jędrzejczyk, especially at strawweight. And she has a lot to win. She's in a lot of those title contention talks, especially with Tatiana Suarez being hurt. Not only that, but the reason that I have Michelle Waterson winning this fight is strictly the fact that Joanna Jędrzejczyk goes to the decision. Michelle Waterson finishes fights. Michelle Waterson has gone to the decision 7 times. Joanna has gone to the decision 12 times. Lost 2 of them, won 10 of them. But I don't think Michelle Waterson lets it go that far. I don't think Michelle Waterson lets this fight go all the way, all 5 rounds. I think Michelle Waterson is ready, and she is super determined to win this fight in general. And I don't really see a situation where Joanna gets the win off of her. Like you said, she's kind of falling out of that contention. She's kind of falling out of her prime, I would say. Whereas Michelle Waterson, we still don't know where she could go. The sky's kind of the limit with Michelle Waterson, and it's something that's really exciting to see in such a stacked division with the strawweights.
As I said before, and as you just reiterated, they are on 2 different slopes of a hill.
Yes.
Michelle Waterson has the mindset of, I'm excited, I'm happy to be here, I'm fighting because it's enjoyable and it's fun, and you know what, I'm making money while I'm doing it, and hey, let's see how long I can do this and possibly get a title shot. Joanna Jędrzejczyk has the mindset of, oh crap, I've been losing fights. I used to hold the belt, but I got humiliated by Rose Namajunas, and then a second time, where do I go from here?
Who are all legends?
Yeah, no,
no, and you're right. Who are legends, but Michelle Waterson is is climbing up that tree.
There's just so much a difference in, I guess, self-belief at this point, or confidence, you could say. And ring rust is going to play a role for Joanna Jędrzejczyk. The mental side is going to play a huge role for that. I'm just excited for this fight because, like we've said, they're on 2 different spectrums. It's always fun to see 2 different mental standpoints come together in the octagon. Round 5, we have for you, our listeners, another edition of Are You Here For It? We did this once before, and I mean, I don't blame you for not remembering if we did it, but it's a fun segment. It was fun to do. So we're going to jump back into that. Are you here for it? Israel Adesanya versus Jon Jones.
I think you know my answer.
I don't.
No! Why would I want to see Israel Adesanya versus Jon Jones? Jon Jones walks around at 220, 225. Israel Adesanya barely makes middleweight. In what world do we want to see these 2 fight? Jon Jones isn't going to make the cut. Israel Adesanya isn't going to magically gain 20 pounds of muscle or 20 pounds of fat or whatever it is and still be the same kickboxer. He's not going to have the same quickness. He's not going to have the same movement. It's not going to be the same. He's too small for Jon Jones. Jon Jones is just as good at kickboxing as an Israel Adesanya, and he also has the wrestling side of it, and he's got a weight advantage. I don't see any reason why people want this fight to happen. I don't want to see Israel Adesanya lose his middleweight title, not lose his middleweight title, but lose his relevancy his status to fight the greatest of all time and get absolutely smashed like everybody else does. There's no reason. It's so unnecessary. This is the most unnecessary fight of anything. I think this is the stupidest super fight I have ever heard. This is like Henry Cejudo calling out an Alexander Volkanovski. Would he do it? Probably. But would Israel Adesanya doing it? He is. It's stupid, Brick. What's the point? Why do we want to do this? There's no reason to have Israel Adesanya versus Jon Jones. Stay in your divisions, dominate. Israel Adesanya, if anything, should be fighting Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, Tyron Woodley. He should not be fighting guys at 205 pounds when he loses 20, when he can't even hit 185.
He just knocked out a guy who probably walks around at 200 pounds. My short answer, I'm here for it. Come on. You got 2 of the most elite strikers breathing today. 2 of the best fighters who are still alive. And they are magically in the upper divisions. If you had a guy who was exciting as Israel Adesanya, but he just happened to be a flyweight, then it's like, oh, that's too bad. We would have loved to see them fight if they were the same weight class. Like we talked about that. You have fighters who you would love to see fight other fighters if it weren't for these weight constrictions or
Demetrius
restrictions.
Johnson, John Jones.
Absolutely.
When I die and go to heaven, I'm gonna like make them both the same size and have them fight.
Or DJ DC. My gosh. See, but that's what I'm saying. Like this is where we as fight fans get to kind of realize the comic book nature of the human experience.
But that's fantasy. This is reality. This is really going to happen, possibly, Brick. And that's why I don't want to see it happen, because it's fun to talk about and it's fun to come up with these scenarios where it could happen, but it's not. How does this happen? Like do they meet at catch weight and go to 195?
Why not? Conor McGregor, a natural featherweight, went up and fought Nate Diaz.
Natural featherweight?
Absolutely.
He was sunken in like a skeleton, Brick. He was killing himself to 145. That's why he's never gone back.
And he was defeating guys like Max Holloway and Jose Aldo without a second thought.
Yeah, because he was cutting down from 170.
Look, all I'm saying is you talk about legendary fights, you talk about legendary fighters. Most of those bouts have been at catchweight.
But that's a missed weight cut. That's not okay, let's agree to meet at 190.
Some of those happen. No, like Conor McGregor, Nate Diaz, for example. I'm going to stick with his example till I die.
Okay.
If you took Conor McGregor as a featherweight and you took his attitude and you took how fun he was to watch, and then you had another fan who was a fan of Nate Diaz, he's a welterweight, right? You're like, these guys are never going to fight, but how fun would it be if they did? That has given us one of the greatest rivalries in MMA history, with the smack talk, with the back and forth, the rear naked choke, and then the 5-round decision. That has given us MMA gold, UFC gold.
Here's my thing, though. That would all make sense if Israel Adesanya was any other middleweight. And Israel Adesanya was coming in at 185, but everybody goes, he looks sunken in, he has a big weight cut. But he doesn't. He doesn't. He's literally, he does not cut weight. He does not cut weight. So what's the point? Because Conor McGregor would cut weight, but he was right there at 170. He just didn't have to cut weight anymore. But Israel Adesanya doesn't cut weight, and he's already 20 pounds lighter, 30, 40 pounds lighter than John Jones. Who knows what he walks around at?
I think we should learn a lesson from Israel Adesanya, what he said this weekend. After and during he had the belt strapped around his waist, he was talking smack to the camera. This was without a mic in his face. And he said, I don't have any knockout power. That was one of the sickest parts of the night. Yeah. He said, I don't have any knockout power. I can't hang with these stronger guys. I think we should learn a lesson from this. Forget weight classes for just a second and let the kid at least talk smack, at least get a super fight hyped up possibly. It's kind of the same thing with John Jones going up to fight Stipe at heavyweight. It's like, he's not a natural heavyweight. He could fight at heavyweight, sure, as Israel Adesanya could fight at light heavyweight.
He could totally fight at heavyweight.
Sure, okay, sure. But he's a natural light heavyweight. All I'm saying is, if we take away the drama and the restrictions of weight classes, we have some of the best fights in UFC history. And I think that's what we have in two of the most technical strikers to ever live. Although, sure, if John Jones took him to the ground and pounded him, it would be a different story. Sure, but that's what we said about Robert Whittaker.
You just said that John Jones is a natural light heavyweight, Israel Adesanya is a natural middleweight. Israel Adesanya is not a natural middleweight. In terms of fighting, pretty much every fighter cuts weight. And even if it's a small cut, Israel Adesanya is naturally a welterweight. And that's what makes him so great at 185. And that's what wowed me so much on Saturday. To go up another weight class, I just don't see it happening.
The most coveted attribute in the UFC. We've talked about it. It's not striking. It's not wrestling. It's not jiu-jitsu. It's not even the cockiness, the confidence that you see guys like Conor McGregor walk around with. You see guys like Israel Adesanya walk around with. It's not those attributes. It's an undefeated record. Guys who are on my top 2 watch list in the UFC, almost all of them have an undefeated record. Having an undefeated record in the UFC is kind of like having the golden ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, right? Only a few have it, and those who don't have it want to take it away. That's all there is to it. You have fighters like Kron Gracie, Paulo Costa, Israel Adesanya, Mark Madsen, Jack Shore, who is a rising prospect, Gregor Gillespie, and unofficially John Jones. These men have the world in their hands because they have taken care of their career up to this point, because they have been so careful. Also, Khabib Nurmagomedov, let's not forget about him, the legend at lightweight that he is and will continue to be. These fighters have taken care of their career up until this point. They have picked and chosen their fights magnificently. And we have all of these fighters, whether it's grinding, whether it's wrestling, striking, going the distance, doing whatever it is you have to do to get that win. At the end of the day, that is all that these men care about, and that is winning. And in the UFC, when you win, you advance. And when you advance, you win belts. When you win belts, you make so much more of yourself in terms of legacy, also in terms of financial benefit. But these guys are on my top watch list because of their spotless records.
As much as people hate to say it, there are such things as gatekeepers in the sport of MMA. The guys who can beat basically everyone, but they can't beat the big dogs. One of the funnest things the UFC has to offer is the rise of a young star. Whether it's Conor McGregor going through the featherweight division or Jon Jones becoming the youngest champion in UFC history, Kron Gracie's rise and his journey begins this Saturday. Now, this isn't his first fight in the UFC, but he is now being put up against a veteran, and he is now being put up against a gatekeeper. Cub Swanson losses against some of the greatest ever and beaten a few along the way. He is a gatekeeper. But Kron is more than just a 5-0 record and a training partner of Nate Diaz. Kron has been fighting his entire life. Kron has his last name stapled to the life of fighting. Kron is the son of the greatest fighter to never step in the UFC octagon, because his father, Elio, would not allow it. When the UFC was organized by Horry and Gracie, everyone wanted to see Rickson, Kron's father, compete. But Rickson was too good, too big, and too strong. He could not represent the art of jiu-jitsu the way that a smaller Royce could. And that's why Royce was picked to represent the name of the Gracies at UFC 1. Rickson has trained Kron to be a monster. From the moment he was born, on his way to tournaments telling him that he was going to war, to not smile, to not laugh. And Kron, afraid to lose because of the consequences of his father. Kron has been raised by the man who always deserved a shot at the UFC but never got it. 7 of Cub Swanson's 11 losses are from submission, and 5 of Gracie's 5 wins are by submission. Kron is here to make the most out of the Gracie name, bring back respect to himself, his family, and the art of jiu-jitsu. And Saturday, he gets to break through the gatekeeper, and then he gets to be in talk with the big dogs. It's so fun seeing the rise of a star. It will be so fun seeing the rise of Ice Cream Kron.
Chills. Absolute chills from the man, Blake Aurelian, once again. We would like to thank everyone for tuning into episode 9 of From the Nosebleeds MMA podcast. We will see you again this time next week. Once again, a big shout out to Robert Jemias, Don't Be a Richard Music, and Sociwear Clothing. If you would like some fire merch, some From the Nosebleeds tees, go to sociwear.com/collection/FTN podcast. All the proceeds go to the podcast and the development thereof.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for everybody who listens, everybody who comments. Tag your friends on Instagram, tag your friends on Facebook, whatever you guys are watching us through YouTube, tag your friends, show people around this wonderful podcast that we have so much fun making. We are so grateful for everybody. Don't be Richard, send us off.